Welcome to Optimal Equestrian, a podcast where I dive into how to optimize ourselves, our horses, and our businesses. Please support the show by following or subscribing to my channel, and you can follow us on Instagram at Optimal Equestrian. Be sure to share the show with anyone who you think might benefit or enjoy it. Now, let's get into the episode. Today we're diving into the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. So I had recently started changing my thought patterns when it came to saying yes to social events or even just scheduling my day. And I started, instead of just saying yes and committing to all these things or not really having a plan for my day, I started thinking, how can I best use my time to get me to where I want to be and closer to my goals? And it's just ironic that a couple weeks after that, I had this book on my list for a long time. And just a couple weeks after I started changing my thinking, I decided to pick it up and read it. And so what is Essentialism? It's basically a disciplined, systematic approach for determining where our highest point of contribution lies and then making execution of those things almost effortless. And in the book, he talks about a German phrase, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but it's the thought of less but better. And he goes back to that time and time again. That's in a very short sentence what this book is entirely about, doing less things but better. And so if you sit back and think about what is your number one goal in life, and then start looking at what you're doing throughout your days and weeks, and do those activities and opportunities or those social events get you closer to that goal. And before you say yes to everything that everyone's going to be asking of you, stop and ask yourself, do you really have time for that? Is it a good use of your time? Or can you actually contribute something to the project that's meaningful and worthwhile? And this can be applied to everything from your work, fitness, riding, running a business, managing employees, competing at horse shows, and even something as small as decluttering your home or cleaning out your closet. He talks a lot about that. And so he says, the way of essentialist is the relentless pursuit of less but better. It doesn't mean occasionally giving a nod to the principle. It means pursuing it in a disciplined way. Essentialism is not about how to get more things done. It's about how to get the right things done. Only once you give yourself permission to stop trying to do it all, to stop saying yes to everyone, can you make your highest contribution towards the things that really matter. So in our modern society today, we're often punished for saying no to opportunities or social events and rewarded for saying yes and filling our calendars with all these events and responsibilities, even if that's not really what you want to be doing or a good use of your time. It's often awkward to say no in the moment when someone's asking you something, and then it's celebrated if you do say yes and go to all those events and take on all those responsibilities. But it leads to the paradox of success, which can be summed up in 4 predictable phases like Greg talks about. So phase 1, you become successful in your endeavor, so at work or riding or whatever. And so you start saying yes to all the events and taking on more responsibilities. So once you do that, you start becoming a go-to person. This is phase 2. You become the person who's always there when they're needed. People come to you for answers. They come to you because they know you'll say yes to organize that event or train that horse or whatever. And then we're presented with increased options and opportunities. So then you go to phase 3. When you have those increased options and opportunities, which is actually just code for demands on your time and energy, it leads to diffused efforts. So you get spread thinner and thinner, which means you're just doing more tasks, but none of them to the best of your ability that you could be doing. And this leads to phase 4, which is you're now distracted and derailed from your main goal and what would otherwise be your highest level of contribution. So there are some common traps in our modern day society that should sound familiar to you. One of them is that we have, like I already said, we have too many choices in our personal lives, and society and work has bombarded us so much that we start getting decision fatigue, which then causes us, like I said earlier, you're spreading yourself thinner and thinner, and you're losing your ability to filter out what is important and what isn't. The second trap is social pressure. With the modern technology and social media, there's just increased pressure and hyperconnectivity, and technology has lowered the barrier for others to share their opinion on what you should be doing, how well you're doing it, so on and so forth, that you normally would never have. Like, no one's going to say that to your face. And then the third really big trap is the idea that you can have it all. I feel like this is a common thing that there's, especially with social media, there's the pressure that to have it all, you can be the great mom, you can be the great writer while running a business and keeping your entire personal life completely organized. And it's really damaging to think that way because no one actually has it all together like that. And it just results in you becoming stressed, and you're trying to cram more activities into your already overscheduled day. And you try to do it all, have it all, but you're going to end up having to make trade-offs. And when you don't deliberately choose where you want to put your focus on, whether that's at work or your writing, then other people are going to make that decision for you, whether that's your bosses, your clients, colleagues, maybe your family just starts throwing things on you. And so you really have to have this focused vision of what you should be doing and where your best efforts lie and what is going to have to be traded off. This is kind of a funny thing. He talks about the word priority, and it came into the English language in the 1400s. It was singular, meaning there's one first or prior thing, and it stayed singular for 500 years. And then in the 1900s, we pluralized it. So somehow now in the 1900s, we decided that we can have multiple first things. And I just thought that was kind of funny. It's never really thought about the definition and how ironic that is. So how do we implement essentialism? He has a 3-step process. Step 1, we're going to explore and evaluate. So we're going to discern what the trivial things are from the vital. Will this activity or effort make the highest contribution to your number 1 goal? Step 2, we're going to eliminate all those trivial things we just identified in step 1. And step 3, we're going to execute by removing obstacles and making it effortless. So let's get into step 1, evaluating. First things first, we need to start changing our mindsets and our phrases that we use. So the 3 most common ones are I have to, it's all important, and I can do both. Those are just, you're going to have to accept that those are false, and you're going to replace them with I choose to, only a few things matter, and I can do anything but not everything. And so we're going to learn that there's certain types of effort that yield higher rewards than others. Working hard is important, especially as equestrians. Hard work is inevitable in our industry. But more effort does not necessarily yield more results. But the theory less but better that the Germans have does. And this can be a difficult concept to switch to because in the past we've always been rewarded for doing more. You're rewarded financially for riding as many horses as possible in a day or at a show, etc. Yet at a certain point, more effort causes our progress to actually plateau, and it may even stall. So say you own a boarding barn. You're going to need to decide what is the most important. Is it the horses, the clients, or your employees? These 3 different entities are all going to have different needs that may clash with each other. So horses have basic needs of safety, quality food, and socialization. That may clash with the client's needs of stalls or individual turnouts, which will take away from the socialization aspect. And that will also cause more workload for your employees, which would potentially have higher turnover and affect the happiness of your employees. So really sit down and choose what are the few things that really matter and who comes first, what's most important, and how do those align with your own morals and your own business goals. You're not going to be a barn for every single person, and that's okay. If you did try to cater to everyone's needs, you would be so overworked and you'd just be running around like a chicken with your head cut off until you eventually just burn out. Trade-offs are a reality that you are going to have to accept in both your personal and professional life. You can try to avoid them, but you just simply can't escape them. So instead of asking, what do I have to give up? Ask, what do I want to go big on? What is the one thing I really want to push towards? And that will give you a lot of insight into how you should be running your business and what you should be focusing on. Now we're going to move on to step 2, which is where we're going to eliminate everything that does not fit into what we just identified in step 1 as a few things that we're going to focus on. And you can think of the maxim in this step as if it's not a hell yeah, it's a no, which I'm sure you've heard before. But he goes even further to give you his 90% rule. And he uses this as a way to evaluate any decision or option. So think about what the single most important criteria for that one decision is. And then you're simply going to give that all the options a score between 0 and 100. If you rate it any lower than a 70%, then automatically change the rating to 0 and reject it. This way you avoid getting caught up in indecision, or even worse, you get stuck with the 60s or 70s, just a subpar option. So for example, if you're buying a horse and temperament is the most important thing, you're going to rate each horse on the 9s and 10s, or on a scale of like 1 to 10. So you're going to keep all the 9s and 10s. 6 and 7s are automatically out, and then 8s would have to have so many other qualities or benefits to them to even be considered. And so really you're only just making your decision on those 8s, but if you have 9s and 10s, they're probably going to be the way you go. You can also use this when looking at potential employees and hiring people. It's so much better to just wait for someone who blows you away instead of hiring a mediocre person and not having your needs met, not having the quality there, or you're stuck with that person when you can't fire them. You have to wait for them to get so many write-ups, just the HR nightmare. And that's going to lead to more turnover, more time taken away from you instead of just waiting for the right person. I know it sounds like I need someone now, the horses have to get fed. I know, it sucks. But often it's so much better to just wait for the right person to come along than to fill the need with someone who is just going to quit in a couple weeks because it's too hard or whatever. So now let's move on to step 3, which is execute. And in his book, I thought he had 3 really useful tips on creating execution as seamlessly as possible. And that was create a routine, learning to focus, and using progress as motivation. So let's look at routine. Routine is one of the most powerful tools for removing obstacles. And repeatedly doing a task, which is a routine, creates neural pathways in your brain. So once you have those well established, you can essentially do that task or routine on autopilot. So think about if you're driving home, that eventually just gets put on autopilot. You know where to turn, how to drive, all that, just on autopilot. And it frees up your mind to do other things. So you can listen to podcasts or take phone calls or listen to music, whatever. It frees up your mind to focus on other things other than driving. Duke University researchers found that 40% of our choices are deeply unconscious. This is a good thing because we can develop new routines that will eventually become instinctive. And it's bad because you may have already developed routines that are counterproductive to what your goals are. So for example, you wake up in the morning and immediately grab your phone to check your email, or you stop for a donut on your way to work every day, or you spend your lunch hour going through social media instead of reading or thinking or dreaming and reflecting. And there's a few ways that you can change behavior. So one of them, you can overhaul your triggers. So you find whatever cue it is that is triggering a behavior that you don't like, that is not essential for where you're trying to go in life. And you find a way to associate that same cue with your essential behaviors. So for example, when you see the bakery, you normally would stop and get a donut. Instead, you can stop and read or go for a walk. You're still using that trigger, but it's triggering you to do another activity that may be a little more healthy. You can also create new triggers by adding them to existing behaviors. So he used an example of he wanted to journal daily, so he put his journal in his bag next to his phone. That way when he took his phone out of his bag in the evenings to charge it, he would see the journal and remember to write a few lines down and journal before bed. If you're the type of person to schedule out your day and list out tasks for the day, then make sure you do the most difficult thing first. I think the saying is, if it's your job to eat a frog, it's best to do it first thing in the morning. And if it's your job to eat 2 frogs, it's best to eat the biggest one first. And that's kind of what this is saying as well. So your motivation is going to be strongest in the morning and fade throughout the day. So make sure to get the hardest thing done first thing in the morning. Finally, if routines are too mundane for you and you like to mix it up a little bit more, Jack Dorsey used to have a theme for each day of the week. So on Monday, he worked on management. On Tuesday, he worked on product development, et cetera, et cetera. And this allows you to focus on one aspect of your business instead of constantly feeling like you're pulled in different directions all the time. So just start small, change one daily or weekly routine, and build from there. It's really difficult to maintain if you try to change everything at once. So just change one thing and see how that goes and what works for you and what doesn't, and change something else next week. Next, we need to learn to focus. So the essentialist mind is focused on the present, enjoying the moment, and tuning into what is important now. That means that you cannot be worried about what just happened. You can't be thinking about how you could have done differently. Yeah, that's important to reflect on, but in the moment right now, what do you need to do? You also can't be focusing on the future. Get the future out of your head. If you need to write it down or something, then do that just so it doesn't weigh on you. And I find that a lot of times if I'm having trouble sleeping because I'm reeling about something that just happened in the past or what is going to happen in the future and going through all these scenarios, it'll disrupt my sleep to where it'll take me hours to fall asleep. But if I just get up and start purge writing, just anything that comes to your head about it, it kind of puts it in a place and lets your mind say, okay, I've done that, I've gone through all that, and it might only take 10 minutes, and then I can go to sleep, instead of just replaying the same scenes over and over in your head or reeling about the things. It just really, for me, that helps just to write it all down. And sometimes you don't know what the most important thing to do right now is, so that becomes the most important thing to do. You need to sit down in a tidy place to where you can focus and write out a bunch of tasks. Write out what things you could be doing. And then you can narrow that down to, well, this doesn't need to be done today. What do you need to do to sleep peacefully tonight? And to know that you did your best for the day and just start doing those things. Just write out a list and prioritize what it is that you could be doing. Finally, he talks about using small wins and progress as motivation. So research has shown that of all the forms of human motivation, the most effective one is progress. And that's because small concrete wins create momentum and affirms our faith in our further success. It just tells you that you're on the right path and you're doing the right things. And we all know when it comes to change in behavior, we can either use rewards or punishment. Obviously, you're going to get more desired results when you use the reward system to change behaviors that you want. He gives a couple examples I thought were interesting. One was in Richmond, Canada. The police started giving out positive tickets. And so they would give out tickets to teens who were doing good positive acts. So say a teen was helping an elderly person get their groceries inside. They would give them a positive ticket. And you could save them up and cash them for a movie or a pizza prize. Well, this one kid saved it and never cashed it in and just hung it on his wall because he wanted to keep it as a reminder that an adult believed in him and thought he could be someone someday. I just thought that was so powerful that he didn't have those role models at home that were telling him that he was doing good or had potential. And I just wonder if we could take that into a lesson program, and if there's stuff that you could reward that would change the kids' behaviors that you're not liking. Say they're not reliable or they're treating the horses poorly. Just try to use a positive reward instead and see if it could change the behavior. I just think that would be an interesting thing for someone to play with. Another thing he talks about with his own kids, they were having a lot of screen time, and so they did a token system. So each week, the kids got 10 tokens that could be traded in for either 50 cents or 30 minutes of screen time. So that would be either $5 or 5 hours of screen time or TV a week. But on the opposite side, if they read for 30 minutes, they would get another token. And he said literally overnight, screen time was reduced by 90% just because of the rewards that they were giving. And I just wonder, can we apply that to employees or training our horses, or like I said, with the lesson programs? I just think that would be a really fun thing to play with and experiment with. And if you all have done something like that, it'd be great if you left it in a comment or something, just something that we can all kind of learn from and more positive changes that we can make into the equestrian industry. So just starting small, encouraging progress, and celebrate the small wins. That's often going to get you a lot more motivation than any of the punishment or negative sides. And so just think about, what is the smallest progress that I can do today that will get me towards my essential goal? So like for me, I try to read for 2 hours a day, but even if I'm watching TV, I often feel guilty for watching TV, but during commercial breaks, I'll pick up my book and read a few pages. And so it's just the smallest amount of progress, and that will build and build and build to where now I get so many hours of reading in, because I've slowly made that part of my habits and my go-to thing when I'm bored. So now that we know about essentialism and the tools that we can use to apply it, how can we use this in the equestrian world? So I've thought of a few scenarios that might be helpful. So if you're a trainer, instead of cramming as many horses that you can sit on in a day in your schedule, maybe you take on less horses, but you charge more. But you can spend more time giving that horse a well-rounded education. You can take them on trail rides so that they're good away from horses and away from the barn. Maybe take them off property. You can work on horsemanship stuff. You can, if they're having trouble at the mounting block, you can work on those little intricate things that will just create a happier horse and rider partnership. You can fine-tune the age. You can give them better fitness. Maybe you're doing sprints up hills with them. You're doing long walks. You're doing muscle building activities like pole work and all that kind of stuff. You can give them more specialized care. You can dial in their warm-up. We talked about that in Mind Gym. You can really dial in what that horse needs to compete at its best. You can do alternative therapies on the horses. All those different things. And it's not just going to be about doing less. You're not going to be running around like crazy. So the environment in the barn is going to be quieter. You're going to have happier horses. You're going to be less stressed. Your employees will have less stress and workload to do. Overall, it's just going to create happier horses, trainers, employees, versus a barn that takes on as many clients as possible. Each horse only gets sat on for 30 minutes, sometimes not by the actual trainer. They have little or no turnout or socialization. You have a high turnover rate of employees just because there's so much work to do. It's so demanding. So I think that's a good place to start. Maybe you are hiring. You're going to take the essentialism idea into hiring and choosing employees. You're going to be selective. You're going to hire better people. And yeah, you might be short-staffed for a little bit, but it's going to be so much better in the long run than hiring the wrong person. When you do hire someone, you'll have a clear understanding to express to them who their priorities are, what the main goals in your business are, and for their job. So there's going to be better communication, better care, better reliability across the board on everything. You can take the essentialism theory into riding as well. So what does my horse need the most right now? Does he need to be calmed down? Do I need to rev him up? Does he have buddy bound issues I need to work on? Can I improve his fitness for cross country? Maybe I need to go do hill work today. Or maybe he needs to learn how to do some technical movements like leg yield or lead changes, whatever. Or say you're starting a young horse. Everyone wants him to be fully trained quickly. You want to be able to ride him like you would any other horse. But instead you need to focus on giving him steering, brakes, gas. You just need to focus in on what are my horse's weak points and what do I need to focus on the most? What is the most important thing? You can also take the theory into showing horses. So you need to sit and think, what is your goal in showing? Do you want to qualify or accumulate points for year-end awards? Does your horse need to get experience and get comfortable being in an arena away from home? Do you need to get miles on your horse so that you can sell him? Or do you need to move up the levels? Or all those things will come into effect on how often you're going to show, what classes you're going to enter, and how many classes you're going to enter. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of what essentialism is and how it can be applied in every aspect of your life, whether that's fitness, riding, business. And hopefully that gives you some things to think on. And if you're interested in more of this, I would definitely pick up the book. It's been very influential for me. But I will see you all next time, where we will be diving into Arnold Schwarzenegger and the lessons that he wants to pass on to us about how to be useful.